Hello and thanks for joining us. I'm Mary Kelly in today for Deborah. We begin with a verdict in the trial of a neighborhood feud that turned deadly. On trial was the homeowner who was complaining about children playing near her house. After the mother of the kids went over to confront her, prosecutors say she was fatally shot right through the closed front door. Amber Cogliano reports.
We, the jury, find the defendant is guilty of manslaughter.
Guilty.
I just know the gun went off and I heard it. She said, ow. And I thought, oh crap, I hit her.
The first calls to police did not describe violence. They described noise. Children outside. A neighbor watching from behind a door. Over time, the calls accumulated, logged as routine disturbances in a quiet Florida complex where nothing ever seemed urgent, until it was. On a summer evening, after years of documentation and no formal resolution, a brief interaction altered multiple lives within seconds. There were no forced entries, no broken windows, no warning sirens, just a door, a hallway, and a decision made from the other side. Early reports simplified what followed. Later, evidence complicated it. Between official statements and recorded footage, gaps began to surface. Gaps filled with assumptions, overlooked details, and unanswered questions. What happened that night was not sudden. It was incremental. And understanding it requires tracing the moments long before the final one. Before we dive in, drop a comment and let us know where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. If you enjoy true crime stories like this, be sure to like the video, subscribe, turn on a notification bell, and share it with someone who'd love it too.
Every time I turn around, the kids are always screaming and stuff like that. Someone's throwing stuff at this window.
When the victim, mother of four, A.J. Owens, knocked on Lorenz's front door demanding to speak with her, Lorenz shot her through the door. She told cops she was acting in self-defense.
The killing of J. Owens became a focal point in national discussions not because of its novelty, but because of the convergence of ordinary circumstances and extraordinary consequences. The incident occurred in a residential neighborhood under conditions that, at first glance, appeared routine. A dispute between neighbors, multiple prior calls to law enforcement, and a single moment that escalated into lethal force. What made the case significant was not only the outcome, but the process leading to it. The location was an apartment complex in Ocala, Florida, a mid-sized city with a mix of suburban developments and working-class housing. The area had no reputation for extreme violence, and the complex itself was not considered high risk. Despite this, law enforcement had been repeatedly called to the same address for nonviolent complaints. Initial reports described the event as a neighbor defending herself during a confrontation. Later evidence, including body camera footage, dispatch records, and trial testimony, revealed a more complex progression of events. These details raise questions about how civilian gun ownership, repeated police involvement, and self-defense laws intersect in prolonged neighbor disputes. The case exposed legal ambiguity surrounding when perceived threat justifies lethal force, particularly when no forced entry or physical breach occurs. J. Owens, commonly referred to as AJ, was a 35-year-old woman living in Ocala at the time of her death. She was raised in Florida and spent most of her adult life working in the service and hospitality industries. Her employment history included managerial roles, requiring long hours and schedule flexibility. Financial stability was a consistent concern, and she balanced employment with full-time parenting responsibilities. Owens was the mother of 4 children. Her daily routine revolved around work, school schedules, and childcare. She was responsible for transportation, meals, school coordination, and extracurricular activities. Witness statements and testimony described her as structured and direct, particularly when addressing issues involving her children. Within the community, Owens was known primarily through her role as a parent. She interacted regularly with neighbors, school staff, and other families in the complex. She was referred to as AJ by friends and acquaintances, a name she used consistently in both personal and professional settings. Neighbors initially described her as present but not disruptive. Prior to the escalation of conflict, there were no documented complaints against her for violence or criminal activity. Any references to her in police records stemmed from responses to calls made by others rather than allegations initiated against her. The apartment complex consisted of closely spaced units with shared walkways, minimal barriers, and limited private outdoor space. Front doors opened directly onto common areas, and sound traveled easily between units. Children frequently used sidewalks, grassy patches, and parking-adjacent areas for play. The population of the complex was diverse, with families, elderly residents, and individuals living alone. Police records showed prior calls related mostly to noise complaints, domestic disputes unrelated to Owens, and welfare checks. Violent crime within the complex was rare. Disputes between residents were not uncommon, largely due to proximity and shared spaces. The design of the complex limited privacy and increased visibility between units. Doors, windows, and walkways allowed residents to observe each other's activities with little obstruction, creating conditions where minor disagreements could become persistent. The neighbor who later became the shooter was an elderly white woman who lived alone in a unit adjacent to Owen's family. She had resided in the complex for several years and had limited social interaction with other residents. Testimony and police reports characterized her as reclusive and highly sensitive to noise and perceived disturbances. Prior to the incident, she had filed multiple complaints with both property management and local law enforcement. These complaints were often centered on children being present near her unit. She was legally in possession of a firearm and had familiarity with its use. Police records indicated a history of frequent calls unrelated to Owens, suggesting a pattern of reporting perceived issues within the complex. Some residents reported previous confrontations with her, though none had escalated to physical violence. The conflict between the two households developed gradually. Initial complaints involved children playing near the neighbor's residence. The nature of the complaints focused on noise levels, presence near the...
I'm standing here. She comes outside to go to the car or something. She sees him. Oh, I told you I'm going to have you arrested. I'm going to have you arrested today. She has her phone out like she's taking this picture of her. Now he's trying to run back across the street. So I said, I'm sorry, what are you saying to me? And so I go over there. This is my private property. They can't have the dog over here. I told her, first of all, he's not on your property. He's on this side. You don't own it. And even if it was on the site, you don't own this either. You're renting this just like I rent over here, just like they rent over there. You don't own this. You can't tell them, technically, if they're not in your personal space, that they can't walk the dog or even throw their football over here. Oh, he's not taking all this. Okay, all right, whatever. That doesn't move me anymore. So she proceeds to talk, and this is private property, and I am buying this. I said, okay, well, show me your deed. Because until you do buy it, you can't tell me. I can't walk my dog over here. Well, why can't you walk him over here? Well, he's a dog naturally. If he doesn't want to go here, he has a favorite spot that he wants to go on, he's going to go there. I can aim him here all I want to. He wants to pee over here, he wants to poop over there. Now, if you want me to have my son pick it up, we can pick it up. But he's not going to go in my house because he can't go in his favorite spot over here, which you don't own. This is private property, and I have a sign, and this, and she's showing her sign, showing her sign, like almost like she went and bought a little private property sign and she stuck it in there. So she has a sign, she's basically like ramming the sign in my face. So then when she went to pick it back up, I picked the sign up and I threw the sign. I literally picked the sign up, and as I walked outside, I threw the sign. I said, I can go and buy a sign too, it still doesn't mean anything. At that point, I guess she's already on the phone and I'm being attacked. Someone's attacking me. I'm literally in the street now, proceeding to come over here. Everybody's standing.
Where this happening?
Right over here behind the mailboxes.
Okay.
So I'm walking back over here. Oh no, I'm being attacked. She's attacking me. And so I'm like, are you kidding me? And everybody is the same people.
Was the climax of a long-running dispute Susan Lorenz was having with her neighbor in Ocala, Florida, over children playing on her block.
Every time I turn around, the kids are always screaming and stuff like that. Someone's throwing stuff at this window.
When the doorway and alleged disruptions. Law enforcement responded to multiple calls over a period of years. Each visit resulted in warnings or verbal guidance rather than formal action. Body camera footage showed officers attempting to de-escalate and advising residents to avoid contact. No restraining orders or mediation efforts were implemented. The absence of intervention allowed the conflict to persist without resolution. Allegations later emerged that verbal harassment occurred during these interactions, though such claims were not formally documented at the time. For Owens and her children, the repeated police presence became routine. Statements from witnesses indicated that the children were aware of the tension and adjusted their behavior accordingly, though the complaints continued. In the days preceding the incident, police calls increased in frequency. The neighbor continued reporting perceived disturbances. Owens reportedly expressed frustration with the ongoing situation, though no threats or plans of confrontation were documented. Communications between the neighbor and authorities remained consistent in tone. There were no emergency classifications assigned to the calls. No follow-up actions were taken by property management. Children later stated that they had been instructed to stay near their home, but continued to be monitored by the neighbor. No formal warnings were issued to either party during this period. On June 2, 2023, the incident occurred in the early evening hours. Earlier in the day, Owens followed her normal routine, including work-related activities and caring for her children. At some point, the children were outside near the apartment units. A verbal interaction occurred between them and the neighbor. Owens became aware of the exchange and walked to the neighbor's unit. She approached the front door. There was no forced entry. The door remained closed. According to evidence presented at trial, the neighbor fired a single shot through the door. Owens was struck and collapsed outside. Emergency services were called shortly afterward. Police arrived and secured the scene. Statements were taken from the shooter, witnesses, and responding officers. The shooter claimed self-defense and was not immediately arrested. Medical personnel confirmed Owens' death at the scene. The children were present nearby and were later placed with family members. Initial media reports echoed the self-defense claim. Subsequent investigation led to charges, trial proceedings, and eventual conviction, reshaping the public understanding of the case. In the immediate aftermath of the shooting of A.J. Owens, early media coverage relied heavily on preliminary police statements. Initial reports described the incident as a confrontation between neighbors that resulted in a fatal shooting, often emphasizing the shooter's claim of fear and self-defense. Headlines frequently framed the event as a dispute that escalated suddenly, with limited reference to the years of prior interactions between the two households. Language used in early reporting tended to portray the shooter, Susan Louise Lawrence, as a homeowner acting in perceived defense, while Owens was often described only in relation to the confrontation itself. Details about her background, family, and prior police interactions were largely absent. Emphasis was placed on the moment of the shooting rather than the pattern of events leading up to it. Community reactions varied. Some residents expressed concern about neighborhood safety, while others questioned how a fatal shooting could occur without an immediate arrest. Early legal interpretations centered on Florida's self-defense statutes, particularly whether the circumstances met the threshold for lawful use of deadly force. At this stage, no charges were filed, reinforcing the perception that the case might not proceed further. As public scrutiny increased, investigators expanded their review beyond the initial incident report. Evidence collection included the firearm used, ballistic analysis, and examination of the front door through which the shot was fired. The door showed no signs of forced entry, damage, or attempted breach. Audio and video recordings became central to the investigation. Body camera footage from prior police visits documented repeated complaints originating from the shooter's residence. These recordings revealed consistent patterns: officers advising avoidance, discouraging confrontation, and finding no immediate criminal activity by Owens or her children. Investigators compared statements given on the night of the shooting with earlier reports and recordings. Inconsistencies emerged regarding the level of threat perceived at the time force was used. Forensic analysis confirmed that the shot was fired from inside the residence through a closed door, striking Owens outside. The prosecutorial review process required evaluating whether the shooter's actions aligned with Florida's legal standards for self-defense. This review took several weeks, contributing to public debate over the delay in charges. Ultimately, prosecutors determined that the physical evidence and recorded history supported advancing the case. Florida law permits the use of deadly force if an individual reasonably believes it is necessary to prevent imminent death or serious bodily harm. The case required assessing whether such belief was objectively reasonable under the circumstances. Stand your ground provisions were examined, but did not automatically apply. Prosecutors argued that the absence of forced entry, combined with the shooter's ability to remain behind a locked door, undermined claims of imminent threat. They emphasized that Owens was outside the residence and not attempting to enter at the time of the shooting. The defense focused on the shooter's perception of danger, citing prior complaints, age, and isolation. Defense attorneys argued that the cumulative stress of repeated disturbances contributed to a belief of imminent harm. Pretrial motions addressed admissibility of prior police footage, neighbor testimony, and forensic evidence. The court allowed extensive background evidence, ruling that it was relevant to establishing context and intent. Jury selection focused on identifying individuals who could evaluate self-defense claims without preconceived positions on gun ownership or neighborhood disputes. Both sides sought jurors willing to consider technical legal definitions rather than emotional reactions. Key testimony included law enforcement officers who responded to previous calls, forensic experts, and neighbors. Officers described repeated non-criminal complaints and documented their recommendations to avoid further contact. Body camera footage was played for the jury, providing a chronological record of escalating tension. Expert witnesses addressed ballistic trajectories, door construction, and reaction times. The prosecution emphasized the physical separation between the two individuals at the moment the shot was fired. The defense reiterated the subjective experience of fear. A critical shift occurred during presentation of evidence, showing that Owens did not attempt to force entry. The prosecution framed this as central to disproving imminent threat, while the defense attempted to reframe the encounter as unpredictable and rapidly escalating. After deliberation, the jury returned a guilty verdict for manslaughter. The decision reflected the conclusion that the use of deadly force was not legally justified under the circumstances presented. The court cited the lack of immediate danger and the shooter's ability to retreat or remain secure behind a locked door. Sentencing followed statutory guidelines, resulting in a prison term of 25 years. Courtroom reactions were restrained. Owens' family members were present, as were observers from the community. The judge emphasized that the sentence was based on legal findings rather than public opinion. The case prompted renewed examination of self-defense laws and their application in non-intrusion scenarios. Legal analysts noted that the verdict clarified limits on using deadly force when no physical breach occurs. Public debate intensified around how repeated non-emergency police calls are handled and whether earlier intervention could prevent escalation. Discussions also addressed how race and perception influence reporting and response, though the court's rulings remained grounded in statutory interpretation. Local agencies reviewed complaint handling procedures, and community organizations initiated educational efforts regarding conflict resolution and legal standards for self-defense. For Owens' children, the outcome marked the end of legal proceedings, but not the end of practical consequences. Guardianship arrangements and financial support became ongoing considerations. Within the community, the trial altered perceptions of safety and accountability. Residents reported increased awareness of how prolonged disputes can evolve. Advocacy groups referenced the case in discussions about reform, particularly regarding neighbor disputes and gun laws. The case is remembered as an example of how incremental conflicts, if unresolved, can lead to irreversible outcomes. Despite extensive documentation, questions remain about missed opportunities for intervention and how similar situations might be prevented in the future.